Welcome. Hello, my name is Marcela Corona. I'm the Multicultural Initiatives Program Manager with Donor Network West. Welcome to our webinar in honor of Hispanic Heritage Month. Our discussion today will be Latino Leaders Discussion, Cultivating Community Engagement Through Cultural Humility. I'm briefly going to share with you some housekeeping rules to have our webinar go smoothly. First of all, before we get started, I want to touch on a few of those rules. In order to provide an optimal experience, we are going to mute everyone except for the presenters. We do want this webinar, however, to be interactive. So feel free to use your reaction buttons throughout the discussion and the chat option. Additionally, if you want to share a question, please utilize the chat option again. We have someone, Teresita, one of my colleagues, who'll be monitoring the chat. Additionally, if you have any questions, we're going to have a question and answer section later at the end of our webinar. Now, it is a great pleasure and honor for me to introduce Carlos O. Esquivel, MD, PhD, to the group. Dr. Esquivel is an expert and pioneer in liver transplantation, Stanford Children's Hospital. He's going to be my co-moderator today, so I'm very excited to have him here. Let me share with you his bio. Dr. Esquivel received his MD from the University of Costa Rica, completed general surgery training at the University of California, Davis, and obtained a doctoral degree from the University of Lund, Sweden. He trained in transplantation at the University of Pittsburgh under the direction of Dr. Thomas Starls. Dr. Esquivel is recognized as an expert and pioneer in liver transplantation. A creative and productive investigator, he has published over 300 articles in scientific journals and given over 200 lectures throughout the USA and abroad. Dr. Esquivel is also regarded as an outstanding educator, having trained many fellows from all over the world in clinical and transplantation research. Please welcome Dr. Carlos Esquivel.
Thank you very much. And thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Carlos Esquivel. In honor of National Hispanic Heritage Month, we are delighted to engage in a robust dialogue with all of you, industry leaders, executive leadership, clinical teammates, and community partners as we explore this vital topic. Each year, Americans observe National Hispanic Heritage Month from September 15th through October 15th. An important date because October 15th is my birthday, so please make note of it. By celebrating the histories, cultures, and contributions of American citizens whose ancestors came from Mexico, Spain, the Caribbean, Central and South America. The day of September 15th is significant because it is the anniversary of independence for Latin American countries, Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. In addition, Mexico and Chile celebrate their Independence Day on September 16th. Please join us as we learn more about these outstanding Latino leaders and their countless contributions to Latino excellence. We have a rich and diverse culture. Our panelists are living examples of our ancestors' spirit to overcome obstacles while embracing our beautiful culture and traditions. In today's discussion, we will engage in dialogue surrounding the impact cultural humility plays in our conversations with the Latino community in areas of family, education, medicine, and media. Next slide, please. Here is the agenda today. The first item will be a discussion celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month, mission-minded work, followed by dedication to the Latino community and family, leading youth education to improve donor designation rates, and finally, the power of storytelling, emphasizing cultural humility. Next slide.
Yes, today we're really happy to present this robust group of panelists. Yammilette Rodriquez. She's a consultant and national trainer with Youth Leadership Institute. Sharon Castellanos. She has a very long title here, DNP, WHNP, CNS. And she also is the CEO of the most important cause, I think she'll agree with me, Brandon's Crossroads. And she is currently employed with Santa Clara Valley Medical Center. And to finish our panel discussion today, we have Ruben Navarrette Jr. He's a syndicated columnist with the Washington Post Writers Group and a contributor to the Daily Beast. And when I read his bio later on in the program, he does many more things than that. So welcome and thank you to having these great presenters. Next. And then you've already heard from myself, Marcela Corona, and Dr. Carlos Esquivel. He is helping me co-moderate this robust panelist discussion. Thank you. Next. I think we already read your bio, so we can go. Okay, Dr. Esquivel, okay. This is your slide. Thank you.
All right. So this is very important information, statistical data that are really sobering. Hispanics make up approximately 20% of the people waiting for an organ transplant. However, only 14% of organ donors are Hispanic. Hispanics have high rates of diabetes and heart disease. Mexican Americans suffer disproportionately from obesity, contributing to diabetes, hypertension, and heart disease. Both Hispanic men and women have a chronic liver disease rate that is twice that of the white population. Hispanic men and women are twice as likely to die from chronic liver disease as compared to the white population. Next slide, please. So it gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce Yami Rodriquez. Yami graduated with an associate business degree from Ridley College, a bachelor's in business administration, marketing from California State University, Fresno, and has her master's degree in leadership and organizational studies from Fresno Pacific University. Her thesis was in the area of Latino attainment of higher education. She also attended credential from Theological Seminary in Urban Youth Work. She is the recipient of several awards, and so we are really honored to have Yami as a speaker today. Next.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. Such a pleasure to be with you all on something that is so near and dear to my heart. I do work for an organization that is called Youth Leadership Institute. We're based out of the state of California. We have community-based offices all over the state and in the Central Valley. And what I do is I actually train for the organization. I train folks in the state and in the nation on how to work with young people and adults working together to create positive changes in their community, whether that's through policy change or social change, but how can we make our communities healthier places to live? And that's what YLI is all about. It's just been an incredible 12 years working for the organization. And I think which has also led me for my doctoral study. I'm in the thick of writing my dissertation and attaining my PhD in public policy through Westchester University in Pennsylvania. And I think, working on public health has just really opened my eyes into how we need to make aware and educate our Latino communities on how to engage, on how to advocate, on how to make sure that they're asking the right questions and that they have preventative care. My family was embarked in this journey, and I'm going to go ahead and ask that we go to the next slide there. And this is a personal story of mine, really important to be able to share our stories because so many of us can relate to them, can connect to them, can learn from them. And part of a really important piece of advocacy is the storytelling component. We cannot create changes in our community without sharing our stories. And my family went through this in May of 2019. My nephew actually was diagnosed with kidney failure the year that he graduated high school. And we were not necessarily aware of this. My nephew is one that doesn't complain when he's in pain, doesn't complain about anything. Actually, he's such an incredible young man and has such a kind heart. And so I think one day when he shared with my mother that he had a headache, my mom was really concerned that he had this headache all day long and that it didn't go away. So because we do have heart disease in my family, it is very customary for us to check our blood pressure. And so at that moment, my mother checked his blood pressure and we saw that it was just sky high and rushed him to the emergency room in October of 2018. And that is when we discovered that his kidneys were failing and that he had to be in the ICU for about a week. So that started our journey. It started our journey of learning what kidney disease was and how we needed to walk this journey together, how we needed to prepare ourselves. We got tested to see if we were matches, my sisters and I, and we really learned, what it meant to be a support to my nephew. Thankfully, my sister was a match, his very own mother. So his mother was a match, and she was able to prepare her body to be a kidney donor. And I think that's the other piece to this. So those of us who are walking with our family members who have these types of diseases, is we need to prepare our own bodies to be able to donate organs to them. And so you'll see here that this is my sister here and her daughter and my nephew. And this was after 4 surgeries, unfortunately. My nephew had to go through 4 surgeries in order to have full success. But now he's such a healthy young man. And, we're going into 2 years now with this, and he's doing very well. He's taking care of himself and taking care, of his body and this beautiful kidney that my sister donated to him. And this is him when he graduated from high school. So this was the beginning of our journey here. But he's now in college. He's going to Reedley College in the Central Valley. And he's decided that he wants to study economics. And I know that young man's going to do incredible things. But all to say that it was just such a learning process for us. And at the same time, making sure that our friends knew about what this meant, having them walk with us on this path of knowing what preventative care is too, and also what does it mean to be a donor and what does it mean to give life, and to make sure that we are all a part of that in healing and restoring our communities. So I'm really grateful to be able to share this story. It's going to forever be a part of of my life. My father has since passed away. He's in that corner picture right there with the Hawaiian shirt, but he passed away from heart disease and was needing a heart transplant, but didn't make it. So again, just stressing to our community that how important it is for us to be able to take care of ourselves and our bodies and for our families. And so I'm just unbelievably grateful to the medical community, to the doctors, to the nurses, to the social workers, because another aspect to this is mental wellness, and how mental wellness was such an incredible component to this, and how people walked with my sister and my nephew during this time. So thank you again for allowing me to share this really important piece of my life.
Thank you, Yami. Thank you so much.
I now have the privilege of sharing with you our next speaker, who is our nurse practitioner, Sharon Castellanos, and she completed her nursing degree at San Jose State University. She continued her education, completing women's health nurse practitioner certification, Master's of Science in Nursing, and a Doctor of Nursing Practice. She has dedicated her time to helping the community through clinical research, providing service, and an OB/GYN nurse practitioner, and leading as CEO for Brandon's Crossroads Foundation. Her foundation honors a legacy of her son, Brandon, who became an organ donor as a young person. Sharon advocates for the health of individuals in her community and provides educational resources for people to improve their health. And with that, Sharon.
Thank you, Yami. I appreciate that. I am honored today to be included in this great panel of individuals. And I'm honored to present the research that was done in regards to organ and tissue donation. The research was titled Intent to Donate Organ and Tissues, a comparison of two high school curriculums through Brandon's Crossroads Foundation and Kasier Permanente Division of Research. We received, in regards to clearance through Mr. Cruz, the educational superintendent of the Eastside Union High School District, Kasier Permanente's Committee Protection of Human Subjects, full IRB. This prospective study was based on a clustered randomization of schools. We included all high schools in the Eastside Union High School District. All participating participants had signed parental consent and completed a self-reported demographic characteristics with the pre-intervention. There were 3 surveys. We had a pre-intervention, one immediately post, and our delayed post. Our delayed post was somewhere between 2 to 3 weeks post pre-intervention. What we wanted to look at is changes in the survey responses on knowledge and intent from pre to post, immediate and delayed. With the delayed, one of the things that we wanted to see is how much they retained, because as you know, through research, if you're given a presentation, you're going to hold on to things immediately. What we wanted to see is, did these youth hold on to it, this information, 2 to 3, 4 weeks later? All statistical analysis was performed using SAS systems for Windows version 9.3. Next slide. This is the data. So what you will see here is what we actually randomized into standard and enhanced. Enhanced was through Brandon's Crossroads Foundation. Standard was the normal curriculum that the donor West in regards actually presents to the students. And you could see it's we had it in total of standard randomized 1,029, and in the enhanced it went to 1,552. Okay, with the breakdown, you can see there was a large amount of Asian population and Hispanic, and we do have Caucasian and others in regards to mix where they identified. One of the other slides you will see where it says yes, no, and question mark. That basically says of the students that said that yes, they knew somewhat about tissue and organ donation. It was 620. Of the students that said they had no idea, that was 1,691. And then there was 270 of the students that said, I don't know what this basically means, and I'm not sure if I've heard about tissue and organ donation. So what you see with the top in regards to that depicts of where did they get their information from. In regards to the never heard, students were saying 714 said they got it from schools. 711 said they got it from doctors' offices, clinics. 231 said they received that from billboards. 232 said they received that information from newspaper. And what was really amazing to me is that 1,048 stated that they received this from television. I really thought that they would have got this information from social media, but it was resounding from television. So next slide. So what were the outcomes? Television is by far the most common ways students hear about organ donation, followed by their doctor, community school, and about a third of the students had never heard about organ donation. What was seen in the research, there was a significant increase in intent to donate from pre to post in all students. Though the type of intervention didn't have a huge impact from the pre to post, what we showed is that the importance of having some sort of organ donation education is important. The 11th and 12th graders and the students with previous knowledge about organ donation, as indicated by the higher percentage of students who replied yes to intent to donate questions in both pre and post surveys. We saw the biggest increase in no to yes among Christians. What was noticeable is that females had a higher baseline intent to donate than males. This basically just supports what we see in research. Next slide. From immediate post to delayed post, there was a significant increase in the number of students who discussed organ donation with their family. That's very, very important. Individuals that tend to repeat what they hear in regards to donation or in other things are 3 to 4 times more likely to make that change. The increase is significant in the standard and enhanced intervention, and it appears that the increase may have been higher in the enhanced intervention. And so what I'm talking about in regards to the enhanced intervention, this is one that has been more customized by Brandon's Crossroads to address in regards to adolescents. The non-significant p-values from immediate post to delayed post associated with intent to donate and knowledge indicate sustained intent and knowledge. That is very, very important. Students report previous knowledge had significantly higher intent to donate. So basically them hearing it again, move them from maybe or no to yes. Females, other mixed race and Christians had a higher change from no, unsure to yes. 10 knowledge questions and suggest that correctly answering certain questions like organ donation saved lives. Donor can have an open casket. The person who is brain dead does not have a chance of surviving. That predicted a higher change in intent to donate. Basically what we mean by that, a lot of the students had no idea that donors can have an open casket, that a brain dead person does not have a chance of surviving, and that organ donation does save many lives. Next slide. So with information we saw in the outcomes, a lot of this was gathered through television, and that's why in regards to what we have in movies, what we have in commercials, do impact not just our youth, but our whole population. Females and Christians had a higher chance of change from no to yes. 11th and 12th graders and students with previous knowledge about organ donation replied yes to intent to donate in pre and post surveys. That's why something that we may want to be looking at in the schools, not just in high schools, but in our middle schools, as starting to introduce this topic to our youth, to our leaders of the future, and then carry it on into high school. It also, in regards to the 10 knowledge questions, and suggests that correctly answering So basically, these are the things that we may want to look at honing in when we look at our curriculum and our education to our youth. And the enhanced intervention of Brandon Crossroads appeared to move a no to a yes in high school students, high school adolescent students. That's what we saw in regards to this research. Next slide. So I want to thank you all for listening and looking at how we can improve our education to our youth, to our leaders of the future, and looking at doing a lot more preventative instead of reacting. Thank you all.
Thank you, Sharon, so much. And thank you for sharing your son's legacy with all of us. We're all honored to be here to hear how you continue to inspire youth with Brandon's story. So as a mother, that's very, very unselfish of you. And we couldn't be more grateful for having you here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
So next, it's my honor and privilege to introduce Ruben Navarrette Jr. Ruben Navarrette Jr. is a syndicated columnist with the Washington Post Writers Group, a contributor to the Daily Beast, a feature writer for Hispanic Executive, a member of USA Today's Board of Contributors, host of the podcast Reuben in the Center, and founder and CEO of the Navarrette Sonic Podcast Network. He has hosted radio shows in Phoenix, Dallas, Fresno, Los Angeles, and San Diego, contributed to op-ed pages in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and the Los Angeles Times, and served as a TV commentator on CNN, MSNBC, PBS, and Fox News. A graduate of Harvard College and the John F. Kennedy School of Government, he is the author of A Darker Shade of Crimson, Odyssey of a Harvard Chicano. A popular speaker on the national lecture circuit, he is host and executive producer of Ruben Navarrette Presents, live and virtual conversations with Latino newsmakers, a communications consultant, and a personal brand coach. He has partnered with Tangelo Technologies to tell essential stories digitally through snackable video and audio offerings. He and his family live near San Diego. Reuben is a longtime friend of mine, and I am so delighted that he agreed to be part of our panel today. Go ahead, Reuben.
Well, I'm here for Marcella. Marcella, thank you for that kind introduction. I just wondered, when is that thing going to end? I told you to use the short version.
That was the short version.
Yeah, sure. But I want to thank you. I am here, in fact, because of Marcella. I as you can imagine from that bio, I get pretty busy because, as I say, I cover politics and politicians, and I normally go to town when politicians say and do dumb things. So I'm never out of work, and I'm always busy because of that. They keep me jumping in both parties. But I made time for Marcella because she is an old friend. I've known her for 30 years. And so I'm very much here for her. And through her, I've gotten to know a lot about Donor Network West. I remember when she called me about this months ago, and she asked me, do I know much about, or have I thought much about, organ donation and tissue recovery? And I said, no, not at all. And I consume an unhealthy amount of media, and I have for years. And so it said something that was not on my radar. But after I agreed to do this, I've been studying up on it, and I've been really interested in the last, several weeks as to why the numbers are what they are with Latinos. Why are we 20% of people who need an organ transplant, but only 14% of donors? And you can play with that a long time and think about what the problem is and how you make those numbers better. And that's what I've been thinking about and asking people about. Let me just do this. I want to break up my remarks into two pieces. I just want to do a short little background on a personal level, and then I want to get to the slides. And after the slides are done, I want to tell you what I take away from the slides and what I hope you'll take away from the slides. By way of background, the most important part of my biography, or one of them, is that I'm a husband. My wife is studying at the moment to be a speech therapist. She's already a language therapist. Takes me into the medical space as she begins to learn about speech and language pathology. She's worked as a interpreter in hospitals for doctors as well. She's fluent in both English and Spanish, obviously. And so I've gotten a glimpse into the medical system through her. And in other projects that I've done through nonprofits in the medical space as well, I've learned something about our medical profession, and that is that it's not good. It's not good when it comes to Latinos. It does not serve Latinos well. And it's not even a question of having access. It's about the rapport between doctors and us. And so if you want to know why Latinos don't go to doctors and don't go to hospitals as often as we should, in part it's because we typically get bad customer service from doctors and from hospitals. And that needs to change. And that's something I've kind of been experiencing and learning about. I'm from Sanger, California, Harvard writer, media, storyteller. I work with the CEOs of nonprofits, helping them build their brand and execute projects. And I have a donor sticker on my driver's license. So even though I had not thought about organ donation, for 15 years, I've had a sticker on my license. And I have that sticker because my wife got a sticker on her license about 15 years ago. And one day I was handing her a driver's license, and I saw it, and I started thinking about it, and I requested one and got one myself. And as I started to talk to her in preparation for this and think about why it is that we have these donor stickers on our driver's license, it really came down to a sense of wanting to help people and understanding as we age, becoming much more in touch with our health. You think much more about your health and about your mortality as you get older. And having gone through life, and life teaches you this lesson and teaches all Latinos and all people this lesson, it's made life all that much more precious for us. So we're glad that we are part of this community, and it's been reinforced just in learning about Donor Network West. So let me get to the slides if I can. And I'm interested today to talk to you about the numbers demographically, about where Latinos are in this country. This is a huge story. It's beyond huge. This story has been evolving for almost 40 years. And I know this because in the 1980s, someone who was a personal friend and is a personal friend and mentor to me, Henry Cisneros, the former mayor of San Antonio and HUD secretary, used to go around the country talking about how the 80s were the decade of the Hispanic. We've been talking about Hispanics exploding on the national picture for 40 years. And it's happened gradually over time. And here's where we are now, 62 million people in this country. You see the demographic on the lower right-hand side. Demographic growth, where 62 million people, where 19% of the population, will be 25% of the population, Latinos and Hispanics, within 20 years. In 2040, a fourth of the entire country will be Latino. It's not a big thing when you think about California, but I'm talking about Iowa and Nebraska as well. The entire country, 1/4, which you can only imagine when that day comes, what will happen in California. We'll go from 40% of the population today to what, 50%? Almost 60% of the population. What will that mean? And so this is obviously a population as well that has incredible buying power. It has a national annual GDP of $2.6 trillion. We're in all 50 states. We sometimes divide our votes rather equally among the political parties. So we're constantly, every 4 years, you'll see a cover of a magazine that says Latinos are electing the next president. We've defined food, popular culture, sports, you name it. Not only are we not going anywhere, we're getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's making more and more of an impact. Here you see the numbers. Thank you, Marcel, for the slide. You see the numbers, 56% of the total population growth between 2020 and 2030. That's what's coming. And already when you see what's behind us, you see that population growth has already taken hold. It's been a steady drumbeat for the last 40 years or so. There you see the $2.6 trillion figure contribution to the American economy. This is so big that if you took this and made it into a country, it would be the 8th largest country in the world. When you look at the other ones that are not as big, you start thinking about, we're talking about Germany, we're talking about France, we're talking about the fact that US Latinos are bigger than all of that. The younger population is very important because right now I mentioned that we are about 19% of the population. That's not true in kindergarten. If you go to all the kindergarten classes in America, we're 1 in 4. That's 25% of all the kindergarten kids. That means the reality that we're talking about right now is going to be so much more pronounced in 5 years, in 10 years, in 15 years. It's going to become much more important to all of our lives. You have all the buying power stuff and the bigger household, the fact that more Latinos have babies, are having babies at a higher rate. They've always done so. There's been some decline in recent years, economic decline in others, but it's still way out and outpacing the rest of the country. Next slide. I mentioned this before, 64 million people in the country. The growth has been extraordinary in terms of sheer growth, also in all 50 states. The important thing to remember about Latinos is we do come from about 15 to 20 different countries. But the top populations, if you want to think about that 64 million, Mexicans and Mexican Americans are the lion's share of that. 60% of the entire population of Latinos is Mexican or Mexican American. The other 40% is made up of Puerto Ricans and Cubans and Dominicans and Colombians and Venezuelans, and most people who have Hispanic origin from Central America or South America, Salvadorans, Guatemalans. And there you see the percentage of the total US population. It's 19%, on its way to 25% in the blink of an eye within 20 years. Next slide. Misperception, Hispanics are speaking less Spanish and hide their culture. This is one of the things I find interesting. If I lived in Boston and I was surrounded by a huge Irish population, and I have lived in Boston, and I spent, say, my whole life there, I would hope that I'd be curious enough about the Irish to learn a little bit about the Irish. I mean, there's really no excuse for me to live my entire life in Boston and be ignorant about the Irish. What I'm always fascinated by is we're everywhere as Hispanics, and yet there is a profound amount of ignorance, a profound amount of misconception. And some of the big lies that Hispanics don't value education, it's exactly the opposite. It's 180 degrees the opposite, right? And then this one, Hispanics are speaking less Spanish and hiding their culture. We are in fact speaking, English is our predominant language, but we also speak, 80% of us speak English, but a big percentage of that 80% speak Spanish and English. And we also live in households where there's lots of Spanish being spoken. So I'm a Mexican American born in this country, parents born in this country, and 3 of my 4 grandparents born in this country. But my wife is from Guadalajara, and there's Spanish being spoken in our home, right? So you can't really get away from it. The reality is, as we say, language and Hispanics, for Hispanics, language and culture are more important and have always been very important. And we pass it from generation to generation. And not just in the awesome food, by the way, which you all know and appreciate. Next slide. So learning to tell our stories. This is what I do for a living. I'm glad to see a doctor and a nurse on the call because my brain is on fire. My brain, you might need to help me with this. My brain is on fire, not just because of the good work that this group does at Donor Network West, but also because of storytelling and because I spend all week telling stories and collecting stories. And I make my living from telling stories. And there's nothing more effective. I like to tell CEOs of startups. I like to tell my clients who are the heads of nonprofits. There's nothing more powerful in terms of moving a mountain than a good story. And stories are typically, I think, underestimated, by people who prefer data. We're not a data-driven people. We don't make our decisions about what cars to drive based on data. We make it based on emotion. And I'm not alone in saying this. There's a professor of business at Wharton, Americus Reed, who teaches something about identity purchasing and how business works in terms of identity consciousness. And it's all about a good story. It's all about the power of Apple is in a good story. The power in anything is a good story. And I think it's typically underestimated and underappreciated just how good a story is. But a story impacts people, it connects people. This organization, for instance, has a story. It's not just that Latinos have a story to tell. We're gonna get here in a second. Latinos do have a story to tell, but Donor Network West also has a story to tell. And what's exciting is the ability to link them together, to see where there's that overlap. In terms of the Latino story, we're a population that's driven by a respect for 3 things. We respect family, we respect work, and we respect service. When you go to Mexico and in the US, you go into a restaurant, you'll see people say, a sus órdenes. I'm here a sus órdenes. I'm at your service, literally at your service, okay? So this idea somehow that we would become organ donors to serve our fellow man and to serve members of our family is not so far-fetched. It's right on brand, as they say. So learning how to tell our stories, recognizing what our stories are, and finding ways to impart those stories in ways that excite people and get them to do what you want them to do. Next slide. Is that it?
Those are
Yep,
yours.
question. Okay, how about we wrap up with this? Do I have any minutes left?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So my takeaway from those slides, when I think about the demographic issue, I think about how in areas like the San Joaquin Valley and in California, if you look at this organization, if you look at Donor Network West, its impact is in Northern California and Northern Nevada. It serves 13 million people. It serves 45 different counties in Northern California and Northern Nevada. And in both of those areas, you're going to have a strong presence of Latinos. You're going to have a strong imprint of Latinos footprint in those areas. So that means that this organization has to be aware of that and has to reach out to that population, and the population has to reach back. And that's the connection. In terms of Latinos, I mentioned before, the second takeaway from those slides was in terms of our values. As I mentioned before, family, work, service. It's all about being selfless. I talked to my wife about this and I said, there's not a Latina mother anywhere who wouldn't do what we've seen in these slides, who would not give one of her kidneys away to one of her kids, any of her kids. I mentioned this to Marcella and I didn't even get the sentence out before she said, I do that every day of the week, without even thinking about it. And so you have, what's very interesting is despite the numbers, despite the fact that we have, 14% of organ donors, only 14% Latino, this is a ready-made market. It's not breaking through, but the market is very susceptible and open to the right argument, I think. And then lastly, in terms of being a matchmaker, when I look at these slides, I think about, the work I do in terms of teaching nonprofits how to tell their story in an effective way. And it has to be done, and this is where it has to be done really not just once a month. It just can't be done during Hispanic Heritage Month. You have a story to tell at this organization. It's been around since 1987. All the work you've done, it saves lives. For Latinos who value life, who value service, who value family, this should really be a no-brainer. We shouldn't be 14% of organ donors. We should be 40%, 50% of organ donors. Something's breaking down there, and we have to find out what's wrong and fix it. So anyway, I want to thank you for your time, and I'm anxious to listen to your questions, answer any of them that I can come up with answers to. And I just urge you all to share your stories, and I urge this organization to define its story and share it, and find new ways to share it in ways that resonate with this most important demographic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Reuben. That was amazing. Reuben and I had several conversations about him drafting his storytelling segment today for all of us. And we just kept coming back to, that cultural competence and cultural humility, that because we're Latino, Mexican, from Costa Rica, wherever we may be from, we do have those fibers that bind us. And because we understand our culture, we cannot make those assumptions. I think Reuben touched on it, that other communities understand our culture. And so we are all tasked with the hard work of sharing our culture and being humble to hear other people's opinions of our culture and sharing, no, these are the way I grew up. These are my values. And this is how I get up every morning. And I'm charged with this wonderful mission that we have here in saving and healing lives. So thank you so much, all of the panelists. I'm going to start going to the chat and taking some of the questions. I also have a lot of comments for the panelists. So let me go scroll all the way to the front. Let me see. What a beautiful story, Yami. Thank you for sharing. We got that comment. Yami's nephew shows us, this is another comment, Yami's nephew shows us that the need for organ transplantation is not limited to older adults. So that's a myth that most people think. And this panel presentation, these are lots of statements, which is great. So people are agreeing with this panelist. Yes, it does. There are testimonies that our communities of color need to hear our messages, and they need to be drafted in a way that speaks to those communities. I'm curious, why do you think this information affects the Christian community more? I think that question was for you, Sharon. If you could unmute yourself.
Yes, that's a good question. In that I did approach, a lot of this was anonymous. When I did do the research, I did put that out to the students when I went back for the closure of the research, and I just asked them if anybody wanted to share, and I gave them cards to actually write down. And what the response was is that giving back. that's what giving back. And that's I kept on seeing that same word, giving. And so that's where I said they're more apt to give back to humanity. So giving, I couldn't ask them what, because it was anonymous. I kept it anonymous.
Sure.
I wanted them to be as, to feel that they could write whatever they wanted to write. And like I said, that key word was giving. I would have loved to be able to say, giving what? Is it giving, in regards to clothing, is it giving life? And so my interpretation is that they would give back to humanity in whichever way that was.
Great, thank you. So I have a question to Reuben, directed to Reuben. How would you approach the population that does not fully trust the medical society when approached with organ and tissue donation as a viable option for their loved one?
So that's a really big question. I think you have to attack it two ways, right? I think you have to repair what's broken in the medical profession so that people see on a more active and direct basis that you're not dealing with arrogant and condescending doctors who tell us what we're doing wrong, but don't, show up to help us and serve us. And don't feel bad about this. This isn't the only profession that has trouble dealing with Latinos. Police officers. I've given this talk to many different professions, who likewise I think need some cultural sensitivity, and that's one of them. But on our side, I think the emphasis there is to focus on things that do work for us. If we don't have a positive feeling about the medical profession, we do have a positive feeling about the things I talked about before. That's family and service and helping one another and being of service, and ultimately realizing that why would we selfishly, we are a selfless population. Why would we selfishly hold on to our organs only to watch them die and not be of service to anybody if we could possibly share them with people in need and give life to somebody else? And as I said, as you go on in life, you learn these lessons. You bury people who are close to you. You lose children, God forbid. You lose parents, and it's driven home to you sort of the value of life. And so I think that's where I would aim. I would really emphasize the strong thing and not necessarily dwell too much on the problem. The institutions themselves should repair as much as they can to make themselves more user-friendly. It's not about speaking Spanish. It's about talking our language, and our language means a kind of cultural competency. It's what Marcella talked about before. You need three things for cultural competency. You need curiosity, you need humility, and you need an open-mindedness. There's nothing wrong with saying, I don't understand the first thing about your community, now teach me. But you don't get too many doctors saying that.
Except Dr. Esquivel, who's a lifesaver here at Stanford Children's Health, and he has, I know we're going to be doing an event to honor him soon with a multicultural group of children who have him to thank for their extended life and Sharon's dedication. But I think it is true. I think we find that doing community outreach efforts that a lot of the community just avoids going to the doctor for various reasons, but a lot of them are the myths that they carry from generation to generation. We have just a few minutes left. So there was another question in the chat for Reuben. It looks longer, so I'll put it to you quickly. And if you can't respond to the whole thing, you can always email me, and then we'll get this to the panelists. I also have a lot of panelists requesting Sharon's slide deck for data, and we will get that to everyone who emails your contact with Donor Network West. So lastly, Reuben, what can community education and communication pros do to help debunk myths about Latinos and promote more cultural awareness and appreciation for culture, as you discussed?
Well, that's what we're doing wrong, right? That's my profession. This is where I'm falling short. Where journalists in America are falling short, and where people in media are not doing a good enough job of reflecting America as it exists today. So what we in media can do, and we in the communication space can do, is listen more, learn more, be curious. This experience for me started with a conversation with an old friend who said, do you know anything about organ donations? And I said, I've never thought about that. But I've thought about that more in the last several weeks than I have in my entire life.
And you're going to be thinking about it.
And I'm going to keep thinking about it. So we in media have to do our best to, again, be more humble, to listen more, and tell the story of America as it is, not as it used to be.
Great. So now we have Dr. Esquivel, who will go ahead and close our webinar out, and then I'll have to say a few words at the very end. Thank you, Dr. Esquivel.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the speakers. The presentations were outstanding. I'm truly honored to participate in this webinar. These leaders, these Latino leaders, share their individual journeys to save and heal lives through transplantation, and their passion for being relentless servant leaders in their chosen career paths. Since 1996, we have worked tirelessly to champion this monthly observance in the multicultural communities that we serve. A staggering 60% of the national waiting list is comprised of ethnically diverse patients. And with this in mind, we must continue to be vigilant in our efforts to close the donation gap for multicultural patients. Donor Network West is committed to our Latino community internally and externally. A huge thank you to our panelists for lending their time and talent to this rich discussion. Our panel demonstrates what it means to bring passion, equity, inclusion, excellence, and authentic conversations to our mission every day. I'm truly honored to participate in this webinar. It's the highlight of my day, of the week, of the month, of the year. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Esquivel. So we just wanted to close out our webinar in celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month. And as Reuben mentioned, we'll be hosting many more. So look out for my emails. One person has the opportunity in death to save 8 people through organ donation and enhance the lives of nearly 75 people through tissue donation. We work tirelessly within our multicultural communities to make those second chances at life possible. Be sure to communicate your decision when you decide to make that decision at the DMV, like so many of our panelists have done and our guests, attendees. And make sure you share that with your loved ones, your family and friends, especially within the Latino community. That is key to keeping us all on the same wavelength. For more information, you may visit donornetworkwest.org. Everyone in this difficult COVID time, we'd ask that you please continue to stay safe and healthy. You're all much appreciated and needed in our mission. Gracias and buenas tardes. That concludes our webinar. Thank you all so much for attending today. Go out and share the message of love and hope with everyone you know. Thank you.